Prosecutors in Boston say a social worker pretended to be a traumatized teen in the foster care system and managed to enroll in several local schools before she got caught. We're talking with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Behr about what on earth is going on here. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. This is a new one, to say the least. Prosecutors in Boston, they are laying out a damning and bizarre case against 32-year-old former social worker Shelby Hewitt after they say she went to extreme lengths to pose as a teenager and attend local schools. You heard me right. Yeah. In court this week, she pleaded not guilty to 9 charges related to forgery and fraud. You see, while Hewitt was pretending to be a 9th grader and later a 7th grader, court documents say she had already attended college and graduate school and worked for the Department of Children and Families. She resigned back in February of this year. But according to prosecutors, the scheme started 2 years ago, and Hewitt allegedly pretended to be a child in need in DCF custody. But at the same time, she kept on collecting her state salary of $54,000 a year. Now, you might be asking, how did she allegedly do this, right? Well, prosecutors say that she had to forge all sorts of documents to keep this elaborate scam going. She allegedly created her own website domain to send emails from email addresses that looked very similar to the official DCF email address. She then pretended to be 2 different DCF workers, Michael Kornetsky and Michelle Delphi, and she did that to get herself enrolled in both a behavioral treatment center and Boston Public Schools. In fact, to get herself into the Walden Behavioral Treatment Center, she allegedly impersonated as a real child who was in state custody, stole this person's identity. Now, according to the statement of facts, she allegedly enrolled as a 16-year-old student at Jeremiah E. Burke High School in the fall of 2022, where she actually joined the girls' basketball team. Here's a side note. She apparently chose the number 32 for her jersey, her age, remember? Then she requested a transfer to Brighton High School. In June of 2023, she allegedly enrolled under a different name at English High School in Jamaica Plain, this time posing as a 13-year-old.
This intricate but false narrative of being an extremely traumatized child with significant special educational needs and emotional needs.
So Hewitt is charged with various crimes, including document forgery and identity theft. Her lawyer has said that Hewitt has a long documented history of mental health issues and is getting treatment.
I can certainly understand the outrage that parents would feel. I certainly would feel the same as a parent if my child was in a school that wasn't being properly supervised.
By the way, how was she found out? I know you're probably wondering that. Well, it turns out that an administrator saw all these problems in her registration paperwork after someone posing as her father tried to get her transferred out of English High School. Again, someone posing as her father. And reportedly, not only that, students started seeing there were discrepancies in her story. They even found her yearbook photo from when she actually attended Sharon High School. For now, Shelby Hewitt is out on $5,000 bail, and her trial is scheduled for September of next year. She's required to stay away from social work, any schools, and anyone under the age of 18. Let me bring in right now forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Behr. Doctor, great to have you here. My gosh. You know what I'm going to ask you? If she really did do this, why?
Well, she certainly exposed cracks within the system. And I actually think it was pretty ingenious on her part to be able to do this and to pull this off. But, you know, when I see this case, it reminds me of actually 2 different movies. It reminds me of the movie Never Been Kissed with Drew Barrymore, where she's an undercover reporter and she goes back to high school. And also the movie 21 Jump Street.
And 22 Jump Street, just to be clear. But yeah,
right. Sorry, 22 Jump Street, or maybe 32 Jump Street.
It was 21, 22. They'll probably make a 23rd, but yeah.
Exactly. But the point is that they go back to high school, and besides the plot of what they're trying to accomplish in the movie, they find out that high school was not all that a pleasant experience. And so you see all this trauma that they experienced in high school that bubbles up to the surface, and they become very triggered by it. So perhaps this individual is someone who either had a very, very nasty high school experience and went back to try to do it right the second time, or what Sigmund Freud called repetition compulsion, which is going back to a previous trauma to try to achieve mastery over it. Or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe she had a wonderful high school experience and those were the greatest years of her life. And because she's so miserable now and so depressed, she wanted to relive that.
So interesting. The reason we're saying this, no motive has been laid out. I was curious if it had something to do with her past high school experience. Could it also be, and I am no forensic psychiatrist, that's what we call you for. Could it be it was a simpler time in life? If you go back to that, you had your school classes, you had friends. There was, I mean, obviously she's still an adult. She's got to pay her bills. She's got, rent. But the point is like, is it going back to that simpler time in life? Maybe not even just what happened to her in high school, but like a simpler time of existence when you're a young child.
Well, I think all of us feel, or a lot of us feel, that when we were younger, it was a simpler time. And yes, it was a simpler time because we had less responsibility. And now we're adults and we have jobs and we have bills to pay and we have adult relationships to negotiate. But this could just also be someone who is severely mentally ill, because if you think about why she did this, there's no obvious motive. In other words, there's no secondary gain. She didn't do it for money. And she went through a lot of trouble to forge these documents and to expose these cracks in the system. And you have to wonder, what gratification is she getting from this? Did she just enjoy the thrill of being able to negotiate her way through the system and fly under the radar? Was that it? I think there's something deeper going on here, and it probably has to do with her previous trauma. But obviously, she's very troubled. But clearly, she knew what she was doing here, because there were attempts to obviously fool the system to conceal her crime. But again, it's one of those things where the more complicated you make it, it becomes more believable. But ironically, it also becomes easier to expose. So I think that's what's happening here.
Now, as far as I saw in my research, you might have seen something different. Although her attorney says that she's had this history of mental health challenges, was it specific what those challenges were, what she was diagnosed with, or if not, if you didn't see it and I didn't see it, based on this alleged behavior, what do you think she could be suffering from?
It could be everything from a personality disorder to something like a psychosis, or literally a departure from reality. So we're talking about something like schizophrenia, perhaps something that's substance induced, or a personality disorder like borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, someone who has trouble with negotiating relationships, has a fear of abandonment, who goes the whole spectrum of either idealizing people or devaluing them, who has very unstable emotions. Somehow, some way, this has meaning to her. Somehow she got gratification or got something for this. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gone through the trouble of doing it. So it clearly does something for her. We just don't know exactly what that is.
By the way, I want to make it clear there's another possibility too. Could it be being around young children? I hate to say it, but I also thought about that as well. And to be clear, there is harm to other student. Well, not other. She's not a student. There is harm to the students of her being there. So, right. I mean, if we could talk about those 2 points, maybe the aspect of being near minors, but also the aspect of the harm to the students.
Maybe not necessarily in a sexual way, but maybe she enjoys the power differential. Maybe she enjoys knowing everything that she knows and pulling the strings and pulling the wool over their eyes. And maybe she enjoys that power in some way.
I read one account that they thought she was very smart. She knew the homework. She knew what to do. Do you think that is going into that power dynamic? Maybe the fact that she was so advanced.
So I don't know that she was advanced, but what she did was something that probably any worker who's a state worker who knows the system would do. So she knows all the cracks in the system. She knows all the places that she can slip in. And she's a trained social worker. So she's been trained in mental health. She knows the types of patients that would present in this situation. And she knew that being a foster child would get her instantaneous admission because it's federal law. So I think this is just someone who maybe wasn't necessarily an evil genius, if you will, but it was someone who had the training and had the knowledge and experience to get what she wanted, and doing it in a nefarious and a surreptitious way.
But to be clear, this is harmful to their classmates, right? They said that they were shocked, disturbed to find out what happened.
I don't know, because we don't know what she told them. We don't know how close she got to them. Clearly, it's not going to boost their faith in humanity in any way.
Yeah.
I've heard back when I was in college, there was someone who was in high school who faked their transcripts and got into Yale. and they were in Yale for a year with a B average. I remember his name too. And the way he got caught was he started telling people that he was on a minor league baseball team, and they started looking him up, and the whole story fell apart. And it was kind of funny because here's this guy that had no qualifications to get into Yale, but was doing it for a year with a B average. So
Hmm.
that also sort of brought the whole mystique of the Ivy League into focus. But I think but the point is, yes, I mean, I think for the other students that she came into contact with, again, this was not over video, this was in person. I do think it was harmful to them.
Yeah. Especially at a young age, right? You're dealing with trust issues as is. You talked about, here's something that I find interesting. When we talk about mental health, we always have that conversation about, did the person really understand what they were doing? This was an elaborate scheme, impersonation, forgery. So, as much as this could have been motivated and caused by mental illness, there was a conscious effort. There was a conscious understanding that what she was doing was illegal, right?
Yes, that's really what it comes down to, knowing the difference between right and wrong. And even if she was mentally ill, even if, she was out of touch with reality, there shows on her part a very methodical effort to conceal her identity, to forge these documents. It requires a lot of planning, a lot of forethought to get this done. This was not something that she did where she didn't know what she was doing, in my opinion.
I have to ask you about the defense because you would wonder what they would say. And their defense attorney, and obviously it's still kind of in the early stages, but the defense attorney said, quote, obviously, Miss Hewitt is a young lady who's got significant mental health challenges. That's abundantly clear. What's not abundantly clear is how whatever happened was allowed to happen at the Boston public school system for as long as it was. I find that to be a very interesting statement from a defense attorney, almost acknowledging what your client did, but putting the blame on the school system, which I think is fair, because the question I always had is how were they able to be fooled for so long? Did they not know that she was older than she said? So two parts there, what you think about what the defense said, and number two, how do you think so many people were fooled?
I think that's a good defense attorney. I think basically he's taking the burden off her and putting it onto the school system, which I think is something a good attorney would do if they're zealously representing you. As far as people not knowing and as far as how she was able to pull it off, I think it's one of those things where the system is not really designed for someone like this, for someone who knows all the ins and outs and all the intricacies. And they're able to fool the system because it's not, it's not Fort Knox, it's not a bank, it's a school system. So there probably are not safeguards in place that are to the level or to the extreme that a motivated person could not be deterred or stopped.
By the way, I mentioned that she may have had help. There was somebody posing as her father trying to get her transferred. That's one of the allegations I read. If someone was aiding her in this, now I'm starting to also wonder if it's not just some sort of mental disease, this kind of fascination with being back in school, but if it could be something else, some benefit about trying to get in school. I don't know. I mean, yeah, what do you make of that aspect?
Well, then, if he was conspiring with her, I mean, I think actually he's probably in some ways more culpable than she is, because now if he has no history of mental illness and he's just going along with it and he's encouraging it and he's complicit in it, that's someone to me that's at least as culpable, if not more, if he was aiding her in this.
And just to focus again, what you said, the idea that she posed as somebody as a child in need, that was also different, right? That I may not just be a way to get into the school easier, but also where she wanted to apply this behavioral treatment center, but also the idea that she came from a troubled place. Is that someone who is looking to be a victim?
So I was reading that because she was a foster child and a child in need, that there was some aspect of federal law that would cause her to be admitted quickly than someone else that was just applying off the street. So maybe she did that to get in
Right.
quicker. But, again, she had to know at some level that she was going to be exposed. There were just too many, details that were going on here, and any one of them could have collapsed that would have exposed the whole thing. So again, if I'm her attorney, I'm saying, well, clearly she knew at some point she was going to get caught because the story was so complicated. That old saying, the more complicated the plumbing, the easier it is to stuff it up. I think in this particular case, I think that's true because there were just so many details that were involved that if any one of them fell through, that she would be exposed.
Unbelievable. Dr. Daniel Behr, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, sir, and enjoy watching, 21 and 22 Jump Street.
22 Jump Street, right?
Yep, of course. I kind of want to see it after this. But, yeah, crazy case. Thank you so much, sir.
Take care now. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.